Welcome to our weekly 3-minute therapy podcast with me. I'm Dr. Michael Edelstein, clinical psychologist, and my co-host, Mick Berry, an expert in the field of one area of psychology, which is called REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, devised by Albert Ellis in the 1950s, which caused a sea change in the course of the psychotherapy movement from the older Freudian and psychoanalytic ideas to the more modern cognitive behavior therapy approaches, of which REBT is the father or grandfather. And Albert Ellis devised this approach in the 1950s and has written over 80 books on rational emotive behavior therapy. The main idea, the first principle, is our emotions come from our thinking about events, not from events themselves. So if you are feeling anxious, depressed, angry, then look to your thinking and change your thinking. And in those cases, your thinking consists of escalating your preferences and desires into demands. Must, shoulds, supposed tos, and have tos. And there are three main areas where people do that, Mick.
I was going to say, when you said to the more modern version of therapy, which is behavioral cognitive therapy, I would say the effect, not even the more effective, the effective version of therapy, because psychoanalysis is a waste of time.
Right. The reason I said more effective is because there are other forms of popular current therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, which has a lot of aspects of rational emotive behavior therapy, but misses the philosophical aspect. Nick?
I was going to say, it wasn't that I didn't hear you say more effective. It was that I heard you refer to it as modern. And I wanted to say it's the reason that it is used now is because it's effective. Just because something is modern doesn't mean that it's more effective. But REBT is the most effective therapy that you and I have come across, and many other people also.
Yeah. And it's more effective because it's more philosophical than other approaches. It not only is empirical, as with most cognitive behavior therapies, looking at the likelihood of events happening or not happening, but it looks at the underlying demands people have about that. Mick?
I was going to say it's the most effective because it's based in reality and not some idiotic fantasy that the way that your childhood went, or the way your parents treated you, or the way that you are, the circumstances that you're born make you crazy. None of these things make us crazy. We make ourselves crazy, and we also have the ability to make ourselves sane and to remain largely sane.
Yes. And courage, we're going to be discussing courage, and courage normally means facing challenges, psychological or physical, rather than fearfully avoiding them. And avoiding challenges often comes from such demands as, I must not fail, so I'll avoid the challenge because I may fail. And if I do fail, I'm no good. I can't stand it. I must feel comfortable. And I often make myself uncomfortable about facing challenges, so I'll avoid that. I'm no good if I fail, which is a derivative of a must. I must succeed, and if I don't, I'm no good. And another derivative of a must is, I can't stand it. I can't stand failing. I can't stand difficulty, so I will avoid it. And those ideas create fearfulness and avoidance. Mick, did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, also, if we are going ahead and having the courage to do something that we're afraid of failing at, and if we succeed, that still is no indication that we've gotten over our hangup. If we are judging ourselves by our success or our failure, no matter how much we succeed, we will still maintain our anxiety. And this has been the experience of many, many people. I'm reading a book now about Bert Lahr. For those of you who don't know, he was the Cowardly Lion in The Wizard of Oz, and he was quite insecure his whole life. That's the title of the book, written by his son, The Cowardly Lion. And he was an incredibly accomplished performer, so much so that Kenneth Tynan, a very, very important theater critic, called his performance in the play Waiting for Godot, which has been cited as the most important play in the 20th century. Kenneth Tynan cited his performance as about as wonderful and marvelous a performance as anyone could ever hope to see. And he was still quite insecure because he judged himself and on his performances, and he did not base his self-acceptance unconditionally. Ideally, and for our best, for our own benefit, we base REBT urges people to base their self-acceptance on nothing. Unconditional self-acceptance, USA.
Yes, and you remind me of the case of Helen Hayes, who was a famous actress and said even though she was famous and acclaimed, she said she always felt anxious before going on stage because she thought, this time I might fall flat on my face, and that would be awful, terrible, and horrible. So unless you have unconditional self-acceptance, then it's likely that each new challenge is going to be, you're going to make each new challenge another test of your worth. Mick?
And I wanted to say unconditional self-acceptance is not having a high opinion of our total self. It is having an opinion of our behavior, of our activity, but it is not rating ourself. Many people confuse, or they aren't even aware of the idea of self-acceptance, and they think high self-esteem is where it's at. Well, as you have told me, one of the groups of people in our society that have the highest self-esteem going are criminals, people who are prisoners and have been locked away for crimes they have committed. They tend to have a very high opinion of themselves. Self-acceptance is not having a high opinion of yourself. It is accepting yourself and downplaying, rating yourself at all as a good or bad person. We rate our EBT urges people to rate their behavior and accept themselves without rating themselves as a good or bad person.
Yes, exactly. And similarly, in terms of not rating yourself, if you act courageously in some areas of your life, this doesn't make you a courageous person. You're still an imperfect human who acts courageously, facing some challenges, but with most people, not other challenges. So you're a complex human made up of all different behaviors. Mick?
Yeah, and courage is something that is very useful for us to embark on the endeavors that we may have reticence towards or fear towards, embark on the endeavors that will benefit us if we succeed at them. However, all courage does not have to be mustered for every situation. I myself, I've still got a fear of heights. I don't really worry about getting over it. I pretty much just avoid looking over cliffs when I'm on a mountain. And I also, I think, would have a great fear of skydiving were I ever to do it. I have no desire to ever skydive. These are areas where I don't really care to muster the courage or to gain the courage to do it. These are activities that I don't see will benefit me whatsoever. I don't care to do the activities. If I've got some phobia towards it, I don't care. So we don't have to be perfectly rational. We don't have to be perfectly courageous for every situation. We just want to be courageous towards those situations which we would do best to excel in to benefit us so that we achieve our goals.
And you said that you don't have a fear of heights and you don't worry about it. If you did worry about it, we would call that a secondary disturbance. You'd get yourself worried about your fear. So you have a fear of a fear, a must about a must. The fear of heights comes from, I must have a guarantee I'm not going to fall. And then the secondary is, I must not have a must about the possibility of falling. Mick?
Well, I wanted to say, you said that I don't have a fear of heights. I said I do. It isn't that extreme, but it's a little bit. So I just
Right,
wanted to
right.
correct your wording there.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Okay, we just about have another minute. Mick, did you have a final word?
Yeah, just I would just advocate or urge people in being courageous, to be courageous for those situations that if you succeed in them, it will benefit you to be courageous towards those situations. But to avoid this idea of I must be perfectly courageous in every situation. REBT does not advocate perfect rationality. REBT advocates that people are largely rational, and that if we demand to be rational, then that's about as irrational a thought and an endeavor as we could possibly have. And I bring this up a lot in our podcast because, as it is the craziest thought we could have, it's also one of the very most common. Often people are ashamed to get therapy. Oh no, I must not need therapy. I must not be somebody who has some mental problems. Well, welcome to the human race. That's a nice thought. But everybody, as Al Ellis said, all 7 billion people, that's right, all 7 billion people are screwballs of the worst sort, many less than others. We aim to minimize how much we are screwballs.
Very good. Thank you, Mick, for being an able co-host. I'm Dr. Michael Edelstein, clinical psychologist. I have a website, 3minutetherapy.com, and a book of the same name. Thank you, Chris Rossini, our tech engineer. Comment below if you have thoughts about what we've said. Give us a thumbs up if you got something out of this. Suggest subjects for future podcasts. Volunteer if you'd like to be a guest and talk about a subject, or get some free rationally motive behavior therapy. And subscribe to the 3-Minute Therapy podcast to do what, Mick?
To stay on the rational side of life.